My neighbor has been too friendly lately. I have been working late again, something I'd grown used to over the past few months. Chicago never truly sleeps, and it was common to see people still moving around the streets, even as the clock ticked past midnight. My apartment was just a few blocks away, and I'd made this walk home more times than I could count. The night was cool, the street lights buzzing softly overhead as I made my way down the familiar route. There wasn't much traffic, which was typical for this time of night. The occasional car would pass, and sometimes I could hear the distant hum of the L train. I checked my phone out of habit, scrolling through notifications without really paying attention to them. A message from a friend asking about plans for the weekend, a reminder about a bill due tomorrow. Just the usual. As I approached my building, I noticed Tom, my neighbor, outside by the garbage bins. He had a cigarette between his fingers, the glow lighting up his face briefly as he nodded in my direction. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked. "Yeah, work's been crazy lately," I replied, pausing for a moment before heading toward the door. "You couldn't sleep," he said, shrugging. "Figured I'd step out for a bit." I nodded, pushing the front door open. "See you around." "Take it easy," Tom replied before I disappeared inside. The elevator was sluggish as usual, and I found myself staring at the scratched-up panel of buttons. I lived on the 4th floor, and as the elevator crept upward, I glanced back at my phone. More notifications, more things to deal with tomorrow. When the elevator doors finally opened, I stepped into the quiet hallway. My apartment was at the far end, and I could see a faint light coming from under my door. I must have left the lamp on when I left earlier. Not unusual. I always forgot little things like that. But when I reached my door, something caught my attention. The door wasn't closed all the way. It was barely noticeable, just a fraction of an inch, but it was enough to make me stop. I didn't remember leaving it like that. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, my hand hovering just above the knob. I reached for the door, but as I grasped the knob, I froze. The door was unlocked. I was sure I had locked it before leaving, as I always did. I stood there, staring at the knob, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I had been in such a hurry earlier that I forgot. But no, I distinctly remembered the click of the lock as I left. A knot tightened in my stomach as I pushed the door open. The apartment was quiet, everything seemingly in its place. The small lamp in the living room cast a soft glow, illuminating the familiar surroundings. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, twisting the lock back and forth as if to reassure myself that it was working properly. I walked into the living room, tossing my keys onto the counter, and that's when I saw it. Lying on the coffee table, where nothing had been earlier, was a photograph. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't remember leaving it there, and more importantly, I didn't own any printed photos. I stepped closer, my heart thudding in my chest. The photo was of me, taken earlier today, on my walk from work. I recognized the street, the same one I had walked down just hours ago. My hand trembled as I picked it up, flipping it over to see if there was anything written on the back. There wasn't. Whoever took this photo had been watching me. They had followed me, and now they had been inside my apartment. I felt a rush of adrenaline, my mind racing with questions. How did they get in? Had I really left the door unlocked? I didn't think so. I quickly scanned the room again, looking for anything else that might have been moved, but everything seemed in place. I checked the windows, but they were locked too. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out, half expecting to see a message from the stalker, but it was just Tom, my neighbor. "Hey, you okay? You looked kind of off earlier," his message read. I stared at the screen, my thoughts too scattered to reply right away. Tom had been outside when I came home. Could he have noticed something? Should I tell him about the photo? I hesitated for a moment, staring at Tom's message. Should I tell him about the photo? Part of me wanted to confide in someone, but another part felt like I needed to keep it to myself, at least for now. I didn't know what I was dealing with, and jumping to conclusions didn't feel right. After a long pause, I typed out a quick reply. "Yeah, just a rough day at work. Thanks for checking in." I put my phone down, running my hand through my hair as I tried to steady my breathing. The photo still sat on the table, taunting me. My mind raced, thinking through all the possibilities. Who had taken it? Why leave it here? How did they get in? Trying to distract myself, I turned on the TV, hoping that some background noise would help calm my nerves. But I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept circling back to the unlocked door and the photo. It was almost like someone wanted me to know I was being watched. Someone who knew I'd come home tonight and find their little message. I stood up and walked around the apartment, checking the windows again, though I knew they were already locked. My eyes wandered over every corner of the room, looking for anything else out of place. Nothing. Just that photo. The buzz of my phone startled me again. Another message from Tom. If you need anything, let me know. I'm up for a while. I stared at the message, feeling uneasy. Tom had always been friendly, but now it seemed like he was paying extra attention. I hadn't noticed it before, but maybe I had never looked for it. Was I overthinking things? Or was it just a coincidence that he was always nearby, always checking in at the right time? I didn't respond to his message. Instead, I paced the room, glancing at the clock. It was past midnight now, and sleep felt impossible. My mind kept going over the day, trying to remember if I had seen anyone suspicious, anyone who might have followed me. Suddenly, a soft knock came at the door. The knock at the door sent a jolt through my body. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest as I tiptoed toward the peephole. It was Tom, standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking casual. For a brief second, I felt relieved. Then, I remembered the photo on the coffee table and the unlocked door. My nerves tightened again. I opened the door just a crack, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, what's up?" Tom smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry to bother you. I thought I heard something strange, like someone messing with your door earlier. Just wanted to check in, make sure you're okay." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "You heard someone?" "Yeah, probably just some drunk or something, but it didn't seem right," Tom continued, his eyes flicking past me into the apartment. "Thought I'd make sure everything was cool." My hand gripped the edge of the door tighter. I wasn't sure what to make of this. Tom had always been friendly, but the timing of his concern felt off. And if he had really heard something, why hadn't he called me or knocked earlier? "I'm fine," I said quickly, trying to close the door a bit more. "Thanks for checking in." Tom's smile faltered just a bit. "Okay, well, just let me know if you need anything." I nodded, forcing a smile before closing the door fully and locking it. As soon as I was alone again, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. I glanced back at the photo on the table, the reminder of someone having been inside, watching me. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly jumped. Another message from Tom. "Sorry if I freaked you out. Just being a good neighbor." I stared at the message, feeling my skin crawl. He was being too attentive, too involved. It was hard not to connect the dots. First the unlocked door, then the photo, and now Tom always seeming to be around at the perfect moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. I decided I needed to talk to someone, so I called my friend Sarah. As the phone rang, I paced around the living room, my mind still racing. When she finally answered, her voice was groggy. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, clearly half asleep. "I don't know," I admitted. "Something weird's been happening. Someone was in my apartment earlier, I think. They left a photo of me from today." There was a pause on the other end before Sarah spoke again. "That's creepy. Did you call the police?" "I'm not sure what to tell them." And I stopped mid-sentence, glancing at the coffee table again, where the photo still sat. It felt like it was staring back at me, an eerie reminder that someone had been close enough to take it. I don't even know what to say. What if they think I'm just overreacting? Sarah's voice grew more alert. "You're not overreacting. Someone took a photo of you and left it in your apartment. That's serious. You need to call them." I bit my lip, considering it. Maybe you're right, but it's just so bizarre. And Tom keeps checking on me. It's like he knows something, but I don't know if I'm being paranoid. "Wait, Tom," Sarah asked, confused. "Your neighbor?" "Yeah," I said, lowering my voice even though I was alone. "He's been around every time something weird happens. He texted me just after I found the photo, said he saw someone hanging around my door. It's almost like he's watching me." "Okay, that's weird. Do you think he could be involved?" "I don't know," I admitted, glancing nervously at the front door. "He's always been friendly, but now it feels off. I don't know what to think." Sarah sighed. "Look, I really think you should call the police. Even if it's nothing, better safe than sorry. And maybe keep your distance from Tom for a bit. Just in case." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Thanks, Sarah. Stay safe, okay?" she said, her voice a little softer now. Call me if you need anything. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in silence for a long moment, but she was right. It was better to be safe than sorry. I dialed the non-emergency number, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over me as I waited for them to pick up. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded smaller than I intended. "I'd like to report something suspicious," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "I think someone's been watching me, and maybe even inside my apartment." The dispatcher took down my information, asking for the details of what had happened with the photos and the sounds outside my door. I tried my best to explain, though it felt surreal even as the words left my mouth. By the time the call ended, they assured me that an officer would be dispatched to check things out. It wasn't long before I heard the knock at the door. My heart jumped, but when I checked the peephole, I saw the distinct navy blue uniforms of 2 police officers standing just outside. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and let them inside. One of the officers, a tall man with tired eyes, introduced himself. "Ma'am, we're here to follow up on your report. Mind if we ask a few questions?" I nodded, still feeling uneasy despite their presence. I led them into the living room, where they asked me to go over the events again in more detail. As I described the photos, the unlocked door, and the eerie feeling that I was being followed, the officer took notes, his partner occasionally glancing around the apartment. "Have you noticed anyone suspicious hanging around recently?" the officer asked. I hesitated. "There's my neighbor, Tom. He's been really helpful, but I don't know. It's just a feeling. He's always around, checking on me, and it seems a little too convenient." The officer nodded, his expression unreadable. "We'll talk to him, just to cover all the bases." After I finished explaining everything, they went down the hall to speak with Tom. I stayed inside, pacing nervously, listening to the muffled conversation through the door. It wasn't long before the officers returned. "Your neighbor says he hasn't noticed anything unusual, but he's concerned for your safety," the officer said, his voice calm. "He offered to keep an eye out for anything strange." I nodded, not sure if that made me feel better or worse. "Look, we don't have enough for a full investigation right now," the officer continued, "but we'll keep a patrol car parked outside tonight, just in case. You should try to get some rest." I thanked them, feeling a slight sense of relief at the idea of police nearby. Maybe now, with someone watching over the apartment, I could get some rest. I couldn't sleep. The events of the night replayed in my mind, the unsettling photos, the noises outside my door, and Tom's messages. The fears settled in deep, keeping me alert, despite the police being outside. I stayed up all night, jumping at every creak in the apartment, every distant sound from the street. The small knife I had tucked into my bag for protection felt like my only source of comfort as dawn finally broke. The next day passed in a haze of routine, but the weight of the previous night's fear lingered at the back of my mind. I went through my workday mechanically, my body tired but my thoughts racing. By the time I finished my shift, the sky had already darkened, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. As I made my way home, I decided to stop by the convenience store a few blocks from my apartment. I needed something to help me unwind, maybe a snack and a drink to go with the movie I'd planned to watch. The store was brightly lit, a small beacon of normalcy amidst the growing shadows of the evening. I walked inside, the sound of the automatic doors hissing as they slid open. Grabbing a soda and a bag of chips, I wandered toward the counter, trying to shake the nerves that still clung to me. The cold night air felt sharp against my skin as I left the convenience store, clutching the plastic bag of snacks. Ever since I found those photos in my apartment, my nerves had been on edge. I kept one hand near the knife in my jacket pocket as I walked quickly through the dimly lit parking lot. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The parking lot felt unnervingly still, the flickering streetlights casting long, distorted shadows over the scattered cars. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the faint hum of the lights overhead. I quickened my pace, the sound of my own footsteps loud and uneven. My breath hitched, and I glanced back, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one. My heart pounded harder, every instinct screaming at me to move faster. The shadows felt like they were closing in, stretching farther across the pavement as I hurried toward the far end of the lot. I tried to tell myself it was just paranoia, just the leftover fear from the night before. Then, everything went dark. A bag was yanked over my head with brutal force, and strong arms wrapped around my throat, squeezing tight. Panic surged through me as I thrashed wildly, trying to scream, but the sound was muffled by the bag, my voice trapped inside. My lungs burned, desperate for air, but each breath came in shallow, choking gasps. The grip around my throat tightened, and my vision started to blur. My legs kicked out violently, but I couldn't break free. Every muscle in my body screamed for oxygen, for a way out. But the world around me was fading, slipping into darkness. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My hand fumbled toward my pocket, feeling the cold steel of the knife. With the last ounce of strength I had left, I yanked it free and swung blindly behind me. I felt the blade hit flesh, and a low grunt of pain followed. The grip on my throat loosened just enough for me to rip the bag from my head. I gasped for air, stumbling forward, vision swimming as I tried to regain my balance. My entire body trembled with fear and adrenaline, but I forced myself to turn around. He stood there, hunched over, clutching his side where I had slashed him. Blood poured between his fingers, staining the pavement beneath him. But his eyes were locked on me with a burning hatred. "Who are you?" I rasped, my voice shaking, barely able to speak. His twisted grin sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't remember me?" he said, his voice low, full of contempt. "Of course you don't." I stared at him, struggling to place his face. There was something familiar about him, but it was like grasping at a half-forgotten memory. "You think you're so much better than me," he hissed, taking a shaky step forward despite the wound. "You never even looked at me back then. You laughed, like I didn't matter." The memory hit me like a cold wave. High school. He had been there, always lurking in the background, quiet, unassuming. Someone I had barely noticed. I swallowed hard, dread settling deep in my chest. "You," I whispered, feeling a rising sense of horror. "I barely remember you. You rejected me, like I was nothing." He took another step, his breath ragged. "But I swore you'd pay for it one day." My pulse raced as his words sank in. This wasn't just some random attack. He had planned this. He had been waiting for this moment, fueled by a hatred I hadn't even known existed. "I didn't want your love," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "I wanted you to feel what it's like to be nothing, to feel hunted, to feel powerless." I backed away, my heart pounding against my chest. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That was years ago." His face contorted with rage. "You thought you could laugh at me and walk away. But I've been waiting. I've been waiting all this time to make you suffer." His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, blood pooling beneath him as his breath came in shallow gasps. I stood there, paralyzed, watching him struggle to breathe, trying to comprehend the nightmare that had unfolded in front of me. A boy I barely remembered from my past had plotted his revenge for years, and now he had come for me. Then I heard it, the soft chime of a text message. My pulse quickened as I looked down at his limp body. His phone must have gone off. My hands shook as I crouched down, reaching toward his jacket pocket. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I forced my hand inside. I pulled out his phone, the screen still glowing with a new notification. The message read, "Did you get the job done?" I opened the conversation, and what I saw made my blood freeze. There were photos of me, walking to work, leaving my apartment, moving through my daily life. He had been watching me for weeks, maybe longer. Each photo was sent to him with a chilling, calculated precision. My breath came in short, panic gasps as I scrolled up further. The stalker had been communicating with someone else, someone who had been helping him all along. My blood ran cold as I read through the exchange. "Make sure she finds the pictures. Tonight's the night. I'm going to finish this." Then came the reply from earlier that night. "I don't care what you do, as long as I get paid." With growing terror, I pulled out my own phone and compared the unknown number to my contacts. My hands shook violently as I scrolled through my list, praying I was wrong. But when I saw the match, my heart plummeted. It was Tom. A wave of nausea hit me as the realization set in. Tom, the friendly neighbor who had always been so concerned, so helpful, had been involved from the beginning. He had been feeding information to my stalker, planning the photos, manipulating me. All for money. I felt numb as I dialed the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain everything. Tom had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I had never even suspected him. It didn't take long. A knock at Tom's door echoed through the hallway, louder than I'd ever heard before. I stepped out into the corridor, standing in the shadows as the police spoke to him. I held my breath as I watched the scene unfold. Tom opened the door, calm as ever, his face the picture of confusion. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice dripping with faux innocence. They moved swiftly, stepping inside. Within moments, Tom was in handcuffs, his calm facade cracking ever so slightly. His eyes locked onto mine, just for a second, as they led him past me down the hallway. "You were always so easy to fool," he said, his voice low, cold, and with a grim smirk on his face. How could I have been so blind? He had been right there, pretending to care, pulling the strings the entire time. As I sat in my apartment, alone and shaken, I realized how close I had come to losing everything. Not just my life, but my sense of trust. I thought I had known who the real danger was, but the truth had been right in front of me the whole time, hidden behind a neighbor's smile.